Today for our program, we have a very interesting, and I'm pleased to say, one of our very own members. Um, he is one of our newer members here at North Florida Poetry Hub. Just a little bit about him. He's a retired broadcaster and's been writing most of his working life, which has included being a columnist for the Ocala Star-Banner, which is a newspaper in Central Florida. He's of Native heritage, lives, spends most of his time writing poetry and flash fiction, and he's the author of 5 books, most recent of which just came out this year, Outside Looking In. And we're just really excited to have him be here with us today. And change this to speaker view. And Howard Moon, take it away.
I like being described as interesting. Thank you very much for that, Ruth. I hope I am. My name is Howard Moon. I live in Central Florida in Summerfield. As Ruth mentioned, I was a broadcaster for most of my life. I started broadcasting right out of college. Then I turned to writing. I have written for mostly corporate writing. I have been published in a number of magazines, Photo Methods, Fire Chief, Fire Engineering, lots of different magazines. I've been featured on Folks magazine, which is an online magazine. Unfortunately, I got an email from them recently that they're going to go defunct. They were a perfect place to put essays. And an essay is a very unique, narrow marketplace. What I really liked them was they paid $400 for a 1,500-word essay, and that kind of pay is really nice for poets, since we're used to getting $20 a poem from most journals, if we get any pay at all. I identify as a Native. I'm what now we call BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, person of color. My grandfather was born on a Native reservation. He is from the Fox Nation. I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy writing poetry. I'm going to share the screen now. And as I do, I'm going to also let you know I'm a Zoomaholic. I Zoom all over the world. There we go. I spend 5 nights a month or more in Portland, Oregon, Zooming with a poetry group in Portland. I Zoom with Debbie's group. I Zoom with Mark's group. I Zoom with a group in South Africa every Monday. I read poetry. I like it that the South Africans speak English, so it's wonderful. And I believe it's the most recent OPAP, Mark, that you can see an article where I list all the different links for the Zoom. So that link Mark posted, go take a look. This is a great time to take advantage of Zooming. You can participate in poetry readings or workshops all over the nation and all over the world. And it's so fun. Like when I go to South Africa, every week, they have one of their South African poets featured, and they do a half hour of readings. Poetry is so universal. The topics they talk about are the same topics that are being talked about in the groups I go to right here in Florida. Poetry is universal. It is wonderful. As Ruth mentioned, I have a number of books on Amazon. In 2012, I suffered a massive stroke. The stroke left me with dead spots in my brain. I was also physically affected for a while. The slave driver, who was called a physical therapy assistant, got me walking and talking again. She was a little rough on me. I'd say, gee, I want to go home, I'm tired. And she'd say, no, you can do another 10 reps. I am glad for what she did for me, because I can walk and talk today with very, very few side effects. It did affect my brain, and I ended up with a mental illness. I managed that very well through therapy and writing. So my first book was a group of poems about living with a mental illness. I call it Poems from a Shattered Brain because indeed my brain was shattered. There are parts of it were dead. I'd like to read, if I can, a couple of quick poems from that book because I use it when I speak on mental illness. I use some of my poems because experts try to tell people with mental illnesses how we should feel. Experts, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists try to tell us what a mental illness is like. And guess what? Most of them have never had one. One of my poems was called Outside Looking In. I stay on the outside looking in, peeking through the curtains in the window, never daring to go inside, an observer on the edge of life. Now, this poem is not just for people with mental illnesses. That's a universal poem. I'm sure there are lots of people who have no mental health problems who also feel that they are on the outside looking in. I wrote a poem called Despair. Despair pounces, unexpected, unwanted, uninvited. In an instant, out of nowhere, the overwhelming feeling of hopelessness. The curtain falls across my eyes. I wonder why and how. Almost before I can think, before I can react, it is gone. The curtain lifts, the mood is clear. Each time it lasts a little longer. It comes more frequently, too frequently. So I took a disability and in essence turned it into a positive for me. I call myself the half-blind Florida poet because in 2018 or 2019, I'm an old guy, so dates get confused. I had a second stroke that took half of my peripheral vision in my left eye. So I'm not really half blind, but it didn't sound cool to say I'm the sort of peripherally blind poet. Half blind poet sounded a little better. So I have branded myself as a half blind Florida poet because I live in Florida and I'm half blind. The second poetry book I wrote, there we go. Whoops, backwards. Second poetry book I wrote was White Fox. White Fox is a collection of Native American poems based on my indigenous heritage. I was lucky enough a few years ago to attend science fiction conference in Atlanta called Dragon Con. I don't know how many people are familiar with the actor Graham Greene. Graham Greene is one of Canada's first citizens. He is a very, very big advocate for Indigenous rights. But Graham also has starred in a number of movies, and many of them were science fiction. Graham was in the autograph room. And I went to the autograph room at 10 a.m. when it first opened, and there he was sitting by himself. There were probably 3 people in the whole room. Dragon Con gets a lot of partying at night. So 10 o'clock in the morning, most of them aren't up. I did that on purpose because I wanted to spend some time with Mr. Greene. Graham and I chatted for a little bit, and then he asked if he could pet my service dog, Maggie. I travel with a service dog most everywhere I go. She's a black lab. She's laying around here somewhere. She's beautiful, and she attracts attention. So when Graham said, "Ooh, could I pet your dog?" I didn't want to tell the Peter Sellers joke about, no, that's not my dog. No, I let him pet my dog, anything to prolong my visit with him. And I talked to him a little bit about my struggle. Am I really a native? I mean, so my grandfather was born on the reservation, but my father was half and I'm a quarter. Was I really able to claim that I was a Native American? And Graham pointed to my chest and said, "How do you feel in there?" And I said, "Native." And he said, "Then don't worry about it. You're a Native American." Over the years, I have learned that it's not about blood quantum. 10%, 20%, 40% of your blood is Native. That's actually something the US government put in as a requirement to try to limit how many Native Americans there were. Native Americans really believe it's all about ancestors. And I trace myself back to my grandfather and my granduncle, who were both reservation born on or about the late 1890s and the beginning of the 1900s. One of the issues we have as Native Americans is our traditions and heritages are always being interfered with. And sometimes they have dire consequences. I read a poem that's in White Fox called Starving. The young Inuit mother listens to her baby's cries of hunger. She remembers mother and grandmother feeding her seal meat. She remembers eating muktuk, pieces of whale skin and blubber, traditional food. She can almost taste the tender, crisp texture and feel it fill her belly. Her baby's cries continue. A young husband looks for work in town. He can no longer fish or hunt. In his mind's ears, his young daughters cry. He stands in line next to the town hall waiting for his food allotment. Proud men and women, young and old, stand in line, swallowing their pride, doing what they must to feed their families. Generations who made their living from the ice and the sea, no longer able to. New regulations make it impossible. They can no longer hunt or fish to feed their families. Babies cry from empty bellies. The old waste away, the young move away to the city. Nearby, young, well-fed colonial white stands in groups. They hold their signs, save the seals, no more whaling. When the old ways die, babies die. The old die. The spirit of a people dies. You see, our traditions are important to us. To deny seal hunting and whaling to the Inuits or those who make their living off the ice. It's going on right now in Maine. Some of the natives in Maine are being told they're not allowed to harvest lobster anymore. Well, they've been harvesting lobster since before Columbus was a twinkle in his mother's eye. I mean, and now for them, the government to come down and tell the natives in the area of New England, you can't fish in the sea anymore. We have to regulate it, and you don't have a permit from the government. Never needed a permit in the past. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the native boarding schools, 1800s, early 1900s. Native boarding schools popped up. Most of them were run by religious organizations. Almost no religion is blameless in this. They all wanted their share. The government paid them to teach native children. Now, here's what happened. They would go in, the government would go in and virtually kidnap children who were native. What they would say is their living conditions are horrible. Well, their living conditions were a result of the government sticking on the natives on reservation land that was worthless. These children would be sent to boarding schools where they would literally have the Indian beat out of them. There are stories of children who came back and as adults say that they would be beaten every time they used their native language because God only spoke English. That was God's language. They were literally beaten and tortured. Stolen children, native children stolen from parents, abused, beaten, tortured, raped, all to prove Christianity is the only true religion for civilized people. See, for generations, we were told we were uncivilized, but the actions of the colonials were anything but civilized. The title poem for this book, White Fox, actually was a finalist in the Florida Writers Association RPLA poetry contest. I didn't win, but I made the finals, which I felt very good about. White Fox is a poem I wrote about what it feels to be a white fox, white and fox at the same time. White fox. I am the white fox running across a field of snow. I become lost in the snow. I am invisible against the snow. Fox and snow try to coexist. Snow and fox try to live together as one. Native and white, white and native. I am the fox. I am Meskwaki. I am white. I am native. I know the spotted owl. I have heard her cry in the night. I have walked with a deer. I have sat amongst the skulk of pups. I have sung the morning song as the sun is reborn. I have sung as the sun slowly dies. I have sung in white churches. In despair, I yip at the moon. I have lived with a caged canary. Listen to the songs. Listen to her songs of captivity. We both sing our captive songs. Part of me is a brother to nature. Part of me follows the way of grandmother. I understand without knowing. I know without understanding. At times, I am lost in the white world. At times, I forget the way of grandmother. At times, I fail to hear the fox and the owl. At times, I cannot remember the songs of the Meswaki. Part of me is held hostage. I seek to escape the curse of the colonial. I struggle to escape the prison of the right world. I seek to set the fox within me free. Now, in that poem, I use the word Meskwaki, which is the fox word for being a fox, for being a native fox person. Ruth mentioned I also write some flash fiction. I've got my books in an order of them being published. So the next book, I'm not going to read any excerpts from, is a fun book I wrote because I love writing flash fiction. Now, I don't know how many of you know flash fiction can be anywhere from 200 to 800, maybe 1,000 words. In fact, I've found some flash fiction contest sites that want your story to be a single sentence, no more than 15 words. I love writing my short stories, partially because as a journalist, when I had a column, I was done at 1,200 to 1,500 words. And when I first started writing in the quote, real writing world, I thought to myself, how can people drone on for 80,000 words? Everything I have to say, I've said in 1,000 words. What are they doing with all those extra words? So flash fiction was a perfect spot for me. I have an acquaintance up on the Panhandle who is an artist. I told her I wanted a book called Zombies Are Not Vegetarians. In fact, I have a poem that starts the book off. I don't have it here to read right now. And I asked her if she would draw me a picture of a zombie eating meat with vegetables all around. She did. Her name is Katie. Katie is a wonderful artist. I am so glad I reached out and connected with her. And I had so much fun writing this book. You know, it's not always about money. In fact, let's be honest, we don't write poetry to make money. Poetry is the hardest to get published. It's the hardest to make money. But I will tell you this. I write because it's fun, because there's something inside me that has to come out. But more than that, there's nothing like the thrill of looking at your Amazon royalty report and seeing that you got 222 yen from Japan. What? Now that's only $2.20. But what it meant was somebody in Japan read my book. They bought a copy of one of my books. I have made royalties in pounds and have come from Amazon.uk and also in euros. So some of my books are selling in the United Kingdom and some of my books have also sold in Europe. That's where the thrill comes from, not the fact that I'm making maybe $1.50 every time a book sells. It's that people are reading my book. And hopefully one of them might change. I might change one person through my writing. This was written during the pandemic. It's called Outside Looking In, a collection of illustrated poetry by Howard Moon. That cover is an illustration I drew. I'm not an artist, although I'm starting to become one. When I was in grade school, I took art lessons from a professional artist. I have on the wall behind me that you can't see pictures that we found in our garage a couple months ago that we had been carrying around for probably 50 years or more that I had drawn when I was a child. So I decided I would do an illustration and match up a poem to go with it. These are two of the illustrations. The one on the left is for a poem called City Life. The one on the right is Dance of the Palms. Now, I draw in charcoal. I love charcoal because if you make a mistake, you take a piece of tissue paper or you take a Q-tip and you smudge it. In fact, I've written a poem, but it's not quite done, about how if life was only as easy as drawing with charcoal. When we make a mistake, we smudge it a little bit and it looks just fine. So, Dance of the Palms. I sit and watch the palm fronds wave in the breeze. Their distinctive rustle is a sound like nothing else. Their thin trunks flex in the breeze. The sound and motion bring visions of a dance to mind. The dance of the palms, so graceful, so measured, so melodic to listen to. Then the hurricane winds turn the dance into a frenzied struggle for survival. The roar of the wind drowns out the musical rustle of their palms. I had fun with this book. One of the biggest challenges was to draw something that to write a poem that I could find an illustration to go along with it. Now that was difficult. And also the poems had to be relatively short. On the left side is the illustration for a poem called Looking Over the Edge. On the right side, a bunch of telephone poles with wires strung. And that was for a poem called Light Speed. And I'm going to read Light Speed for you now. The talking wires are strung across the horizon. Words dance from pole to pole, conversations moving faster than sound. Talk transmitted at the speed of light. Even Superman, who is merely faster than a speeding bullet, stands transfixed by this miracle of man. Does talk move faster than thought? One would believe so based on the average adult conversation. Words speed over great distances before the mind can intervene. Conversations barreling along without reason. Pole dancing replaces thoughtful consideration. The need for speed replaces deliberation. I really did enjoy putting this book together, and it sort of unleashed the artistic side of me, not just the writing artistic side, but the visual art side. So I'm in the process now, because we're still locked down and I'm retired and I'm an old guy with lots of time on his hand. And if I don't do something with it, I'll probably get in trouble. So I'm putting together a poetry book called Mad Puppeteer. And it's a collection of poems with paper cut illustrations. I took a quick online class on YouTube on how to cut out paper illustrations. And I'm having a blast. But again, the challenge is there. The poem has to be something I can do a paper cut of. And it has to be relatively short, but not as short as before. I decided I didn't mind if it went 2 pages. So on the left side is a poem called Mad Puppeteer. Now, I cut all of that out. All of the illustrations that will be in this book were hand cut. I do scan them in and then use Photoshop at times to maybe change the position and to work with them. So Mad Puppeteer. We often ignore or forget our fluid nature. We stop being supple beings. We cease to flow like the water we are made of. Gracefulness gone, we jerk erratically, moving like marionettes being controlled by a crazed puppeteer. The strings may be invisible. We may think we are in command. Reality knows the truth. The puppet master grows madder by the day. Elegance gone, we stagger through life out of control until the strings break and we fall into a broken heap. Now, the poetry on the right, the illustration on the right, you know how you can fold paper and then when you cut, you get a string of paper dolls? So I did a string of paper owls. I was watching the impeachment hearing, and I didn't want to write a political poem, but I did want to write a poem about the feeling it left me with. And this is what it left me with, and that's why I use the owls. Following parliamentary procedure, a gathering of owls is called a parliament. Madam Chair Owl called the meeting to order. She was wise beyond her 24 years and recognized the time had come to elect a successor. The parliament had been founded hundreds of years ago. The original founding owls had long since gone to that great roost in the sky. All would agree it had brought peace to the community. The last of the great owl wars was a distant, dim memory. The group had been in deep discussion. The chair recognized the representative from the stand of great oaks across the field. Madam Chair Owl, he began, the owls of the great oaks think it only fitting one of their own should be the chair. And who would that be? Interrupted the representative of the deep forest beyond the river. Yourself, I am sure. That brought hoots and hoos from many of those presents. Chaos ensued. Beaks and talons were displayed. Madam Chair Owl beat her great wings, calling for order. The owl soon fell silent. We will follow proper parliamentary procedure, she hooted in her severest chair owl voice. After all, we are neither a gaggle of geese or a murder of crows. As I said earlier, I love zooming around. I zoomed yesterday to Portland, Oregon, Friday, and I came up. We have prompts. We have 3-minute prompts, 8-minute prompts, 10-minute prompts, and then we critique each other's poetry. These poems came from some of those prompts. Suffering too long. These are unpublished, but they may show up soon. Suffering too long. We quietly huddle in doorways, sleep on steam grates. For centuries, our voices have been stilled. We are the meek, still waiting patiently for the inheritance promised us. Gentle, resigned, forbearing, often peaceful and quiet, tired of being docile, tired of being mild. When will we come into that which has been assured us, that which is our hereditary right? Long suffering no more, patient no more, meek no more. It is our time. I think this is the poem I shared at our last Sunday group. The poem is titled, This Is All Messed Up. We are light, we are dark, we are love, we are hate. We are war, we are peace, we are kind, we are not. Mankind, womankind, humanity at its best. In the same instant, the essence of inhumanity. We are what the Creator intended us to be. Perfect images of imperfection. And I'm going to end with my newest poem I wrote last evening, and I put some fixes on it. As I mentioned to Mark, if any of you know Nancy, this poem reminded me of her so much. The poem is called Hard Notes, Hard Vowels. It's based on, I was inspired by a poem. There's a line in a poem called The Poem for Nina's Blues by Cordelius Edie, written on the death of Nina Simone, a jazz and blues songwriter. In his poem, he describes her as hard vowels in a soft dress. Your music sometimes so soft and mellow, sometimes hard and brittle, always awakens my senses. The notes surround me, the melodies enfold me. In your music, in those notes, I feel you. I feel your life. I feel your loves. I feel your triumphs, sorrows, and disappointments. Sound vibrates through my body. They shake my mind. They put a tremor in my soul. Hard notes, like hard vowels, crash down upon me. They bring me to my knees. They raise me above the rooftops. They allow me to touch the heavens. Thank you. I'll answer any questions. I've really only been writing poetry since 2012. And I just love it. It's poems that are inside of you have to come out. I've talked about that to many groups. If there's something there that has to be said, you have to say it. Ruth mentioned, I didn't do a whole lot of that here, but I write a lot of poems of protest because I believe the poet should be the voice of mankind. The poet should be the eye of mankind, but the poet should also be the conscience of mankind. I mean, there's so many different things, so many responsibilities we have as a poet. Sometimes it's scary, you know, and I've starting to write a short story about that I call Writing Can Be Dangerous. And the premise of the story is if people read what you write, it's dangerous because you don't know what they're going to do based on what you've told them to do in your story. So we have an obligation, we have a responsibility as poets to say what we mean and to say what we believe and to say it as well as we can, to make it sing and dance.
Thank you so much, Howard. That was wonderful. Really wonderful.
All my poems are available on Amazon, and also www.howmoon.com is my author page. All my books are there. You can buy them there, howmoon.com. I'd
Wonderful.
love to
Thank
sell some books, of course.